Good morning, options traders, and happy Monday. I hope everyone had a great weekend. And to kick things off for this week, I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about being careful with percents. And it's a great topic for options traders for reasons you'll see in a moment. But percents, sure, they are ways of comparing two numbers, and sometimes it's a useful metric, and other times it can be outright dangerous. And in fact, this whole idea falls into a fairly new field called behavioral finance. And a man by the name of Daniel Kahneman actually won the Nobel Prize in 2002 for his work on the psychology of investing. And an example that he used is to imagine that you're furniture shopping. And let's say that you see a lamp for $200 that you want to buy, but you find out that it's $100 off at a store 20 miles across town. Do you make the trip? Most people would say, sure, that's 50% off. But now let's say at that same store, there's a $5,000 sofa that you're considering, and you find out that it's also $100 off at that same store. Do you make the trip? Most people would say, it's not worth it. It's only $100 off on a $5,000 item. But that's the wrong way to look at it. The question is it worth driving 20 miles to save $100? And yet in one case, people will do it for the lamp, and in the other, for the sofa, they say no. It's a psychological trap, and it's a very similar thing that happens to options traders. And the reason that you have to be careful with percents is that traders often manage options by comparing percentages. And they'll say, well, I don't want to lose 100% of my investment, so I need to guard it. I'm only willing to lose 20% or 30%, 50%. They've got some type of a mental stop where they're willing to take a loss. But the reason that's dangerous is that any amount lost is 100% of itself. So imagine this. Think if you could buy a 1-year at-the-money option on Amazon.com for a penny. Would you consider it a good deal? Well, of course, it would be a raging steal. And yet we could make the argument, well, we need to manage it because I don't want to lose 100%. Let me just limit it to 50% or 30%. You see, the idea here is that at some point, you have to take some risk. And the better way to approach the investing, especially with the options, is how much did you lose? And another question is how much were the alternatives? This is a big one that people overlook. So yes, you might spend $3 on an option, but if it was a $300 stock that was the alternative, now it doesn't look so expensive. Now, another thing to remember is that intrinsic value is common to both the stock trader and the option trader. And it is an absolute mistake to look at these in percentages and think that one is worse than the other. So for example, let's say that a stock is trading for 100 and one trader buys the shares of stock and you buy the $90 call trading for $10. So notice that it's trading at what's called parity. There's no time value in this. It's strictly intrinsic value. And at that point, that $90 call is no longer an option, it's stock. But still watch the traps that people fall into. Let's say that the stock falls to 90. The stock trader can say, well, I lost $10 or only 10%. But you as the options trader would probably say, well, with the stock at 90, I lost it all. My call option expired worthless. I lost $10 or 100%. And they get panicky because they lost 100%. What's the better way to look at it? Both traders lost $10. But now sometimes traders say, but hold on a second, the $90 call had a much better chance of losing money because it only needed the stock price to fall $10. So there's a much better chance of losing your money, and that is always true with an option. That's part of where the leverage is coming from. But even in this example, it's still wrong to look at that as though it's some big risk. Why? The first trader in this example lost 10% of $100. But the second trader only paid 10% of the stock's price. He paid $10 for that $90 call. And so he shouldn't really look at that and say, my reference point is $10, and if I lose $10, I've lost 100%. Instead, we should say the second trader lost 100% of 10. And that is, of course, 10%. It's exactly what the stock trader lost. Now, another point to understand that I've talked about recently in previous videos is understand that time decay is 100% known. The very second you buy that option, you know that at expiration, all of that time decay is zero. That's a mathematical fact. And so another thing that you should do is to make decisions on how much you're willing to lose before the trade. Don't get into the trade and say, well, now I need to exit early or make alternate decisions that were never really part of my plan because I'm focused on percentages. So let's go back to this example. First trader buys stock, it falls to 90. Yes, he loses $10 or 10%. But now you buy this $90 call for 11. Now it's got $1 worth of time value in it. Stock falls to 90, that $90 call is zero. You've lost $11 or 100%. But what's the better way to look at it? Trader 1 lost $10, trader 2 lost 11. So it's really being worse off by $1. We shouldn't get panicky because we've lost 100%. But now that raises a question, well, why would we spend that $1 for the extrinsic value? Because the alternative was to buy shares of stock. So here's our profit and loss diagram, shares of stock at 100. If you buy the $90 call for 11, you move from the red curve to the blue. Notice that you've put a bend in this blue graph, sometimes called a hockey stick graph, and that's because you bought the $90 call. That's where the bend occurs, is at the strike price. But also notice that the blue curve is shifted out slightly to the right. The break-even point is pushed a little bit further out. By how much? $1. That was the amount of the extrinsic value. Why did you do it? To get rid of all of this risk down here. So that $1 extrinsic value played a role. There's no reason we should panic and say, oh, I can't lose 100% of my extrinsic value, or I can't lose $10. It's the same $10 that the stock trader would have lost if the stock hits 90. In the second case, the fact that you paid $11 for the option has a benefit. You no longer have unlimited downside risk. And so, of course, that brings us right back to the benefits of options. And that's why it's so important to always keep your perspective and most of all, be careful with percents. Don't make decisions based on irrelevant percentages. Instead, consider how many dollars you lost and then compare that to the stock's price. What would you have paid had you had to buy the shares of stock instead of the option? That's really the better comparison. And if you're comfortable with that risk, let the strategy play out rather than exiting early because of some irrelevant percentage of loss. If you'd like to learn more about the arts and science of options trading, please check out the Alpha Trader course and Strategy Lab at optionsatoz.com. Also, please join us on the Facebook trading group, Options A to Z, and you can find a link in the description below.